Well, a couple of things. I think we're certainly at the end of a very eventful day. And I know the press, a lot of you would have come out before. But I think happily, we are clearer at the end of the day than we were at the beginning. We now have on record, and I certainly heard of it, but we now have a record of the Spicemas Corporation indicating unequivocally that they have given suggestions or instructions to the Department of Labor with respect to the issuance of work permits. That's a matter of record. We now have on record too another member of the Spicemas Corporation indicating that this has nothing to do with the revised treaty. Interestingly, immediately after the person said they've given some suggestions to the Department of Labor not to issue work permits, and they would be surprised, I have the quotation here, and it's all on tape, so it's not my word. They would be surprised if the ministry, if the Department of Labor proceeded in this manner. That's on record. We have said at the beginning of today, and we maintain, that this has everything to do with all of our rights in relation to the treaty, and that Grenada was one of the first countries to sign on to the treaty in relation to the free movement of artists. We've said that, and we want this message to go regional. Because if it comes to it, I think, as unfortunate as it would be, we are prepared to take this matter to where it needs to go. That's the first thing. The second thing is that at the beginning of today, we said unequivocally that we were clear that the Spicemas Act carved out a part of the services market, and that if it was implemented in the way that the corporation explained to promoters and today in the press conference purported to indicate that they would implement it, that it would be a gross, the word is gross, violation of the treaty in relation to us providing services in this country. We heard that. We have copies of the presentation where the corporation claims to have exclusivity. We've argued that there is nothing in the act that gives them exclusivity, and we've argued that exclusivity, i.e. a monopoly, is against what we've signed on to in the treaty. That's the third thing we heard today, and we are clear on it. We heard too, misguidedly so, that promoters rake off profit, and that's really why you need to keep some of them out so that you could pick the winner. That's really what we heard. That because they rake out profit, we can tax one and keep out one because we have this monopoly power. It doesn't get any simpler than that. And we've argued that it's wrong, and it's against the treaty, and it's against what we consider to be the natural order, natural selection, for the corporation to debar the persons who have developed this thing over 8 years because they took a loss over 3 or 4 in developing it. And now that they've reached some place where the thing looks like it's viable, essentially what you do is that you kick the leg from under them. And I am a little concerned about this pattern of behavior. We're also saying that it's discriminatory and that the treaty doesn't provide for discrimination. So this is really where we are. We heard a number of other contradictory things today in the press conference. Then we heard too that if the promoters were to go ahead, I would have thought I would have heard the corporation say to us they would get the Solicitor General or the Attorney General's office to clarify this matter so that beyond a shadow of doubt we are clear on where we're going. But they didn't do that. What we heard is that they would, 1, seek to stop it, 2, injunction, and 3, what they would try to do if it comes to it, and we heard it, it's on record, is that they would have the police go the criminal proceedings route against the promoters of the show. That's on record. And to me, I want to repeat, as I said this morning, this is a sad day for our country. I have not used or missed any opportunity to remind people that we live in a common space. We live in a common space. The days when you can regard somebody from St. Vincent as a foreigner or Trinidad, those days are done. And happily so. I really thought those days were done. I'm not going to speak about myself, but I know several people in the room who are as much Trinidadian as they are Grenadian. And I look around the room and those people know who they are. You meet them in Trinidad and it's as though you meet them in Queen's Park in Grenada. That's the nature of this integration movement that we have. And that is what will keep us strong. So when I hear the Spicemas cooperation in relation to Carnival, something that Grenada has given so much to this region in respect of, you go to point 14, and I can speak this way because I've not just come to this. Before people who pretend to be gurus on this matter, I've lived this. I mean, I've lived in the CARICOM space. I'm a director on one of the largest carnival bands in Trinidad. I have represented artists. When Grenadian artists were stranded, they stayed at my house and Vincentian. So for me, this is a CARICOM thing. So when I hear a Spicemas Corporation talk about a Trinidadian band, you know, Kess's nephew and my son are at the same school and he's every bit as much Grenadian and loves Grenada, and all of these guys have a oneness that you know about. I'm not telling you anything you don't know, members of the press. When we sit in Grenada and talk about foreigners, that's a throwback to the 1920s. It's not 50, you know, because Sparrow told me when he was in hospital in New York that as far as he was concerned, we complicated the thing. He said, Pat, I used to jump on a boat in St. George's, right? Federal Palm and Federal Maple, and I end up the road. And he said, when the CARICOM movement reached to that stage again, then you're going to hear me supporting it in the way that I think it ought to get my support. But you fellas complicate the thing. What we heard today takes us back to the 1920s. There is no foreigner in CARICOM. Foreigners are persons who come from outside CARICOM, and when they come to do something in Grenada in the CARICOM space, they have to apply for work permits. CARICOM nationals are not foreigners. That's not our view. It's not any of the guys on this table's view, and I know it's not your view in members of the press corps. We need to say to people who hold that kind of thinking that you can't have that kind of thinking and talk about development at the same time. You can't develop Carnival with that kind of thinking. There is nothing developmental when in a press conference where you are sitting as a corporation to develop Carnival, you're talking about other artists from CARICOM as foreigners. I want to be very clear on this. We don't share that view. So this is what we want to do. We want to call on the Attorney General, because the Spicemas Corporation have not assumed the high ground to do that. We want to do it. We want to call on the Attorney General. We want to call on the Solicitor General. We want to call on the Ministry of Legal Affairs. We want to call on the government of Grenada, and properly the government has stayed out of it, and they've allowed the parties to try to reach a compromise, and that's been a very good move by the government. But at the end of the day, there is a role for government, because the government of Grenada is the one that has to defend our rights in the treaty. And so, having stayed out of it, it is a good time for the government to step in and say, look, whatever you guys determine amongst yourself, that's your business. But the rights of citizens and CARICOM nationals in the treaty must remain undisturbed. And everything we heard disturbs those rights. And the final thing is that we are clear that we need to get some determination of other aspects of the Spicemas Act. I do not believe that it is proper for a corporation to levy arbitrary taxation on people that it claims to be its partners, particularly when there is an inequity of power. When someone has legislative clout or purports to have legislative clout behind them, and they use that clout in an oppressive manner, so that if you don't pay me, you can't do the event. That essentially is known, and I want you to follow me, is known in some other countries as extracting economic rent. On the streets in New York, where my friend works and does a damn good job in terms of keeping New York strong, they refer to that by another term. But where an organization purports to have power to extract taxation from a member that doesn't have that power, and if you don't pay the tax, then you can't exercise your rights, that to my mind is not the makings of a democratic structure. So happily, we are at the end of this today. And we would want to, as we said, we intend to do the things that we said we would do by taking this matter forward. And we may use the opportunity tomorrow to draft a letter to the Attorney General, copy it to the Solicitor General, and copy it to the Secretary General of CARICOM, indicating that we have these concerns and these matters need to be clarified in relation to the bill and the rights of our nationals with respect to exercising our rights and obligations in respect of the revised treaty. That's where we intend to take this. We are open at all times to dialogue. We are not at war or loggerheads with the corporation. We think there's a lot of misinterpretation, and frankly speaking, we'd much rather forget some of the things that were said in that press conference today. I would be myself alarmed if that press conference today was aired anywhere else in the community space. You are actually going to be airing this to people in Jamaica, where you're talking about foreigners. You're airing this to people, you're talking about work permits, when we just had an issue with a Jamaican lady and the government of Barbados in relation to matters of this nature. We think that it is much better that we bury these matters and resolve the issue. But the promoter is clear. The show will go on. We are going to stand by our rights in the treaty and our rights in the law in Grenada. And if there are contradictions, it's not for us to solve them. The contradictions must be solved by others. Yes, must be solved by others. We are going to exercise our rights. We know what our rights are. And for the last time, what we heard today by way of the Spicemas Corporation's press presentation leaves a great deal of concern in my mind. And I'm sure that when persons from the CARICOM Secretariat, the OECS Secretariat, and other people hear this outside of Grenada, the same concerns are going to be raised. If this matter goes to determination in the CCJ, what we heard today by Spicemas Corporation will be damning. It is an indictment in and of itself that you have suggested to the Department of Labor, and that the Department of Labor, you know, you'd be surprised if they went ahead. Nothing in law. Nothing in law. So we want to rest by saying that we have left the door open. We would like to reach consensus. We think we can reach consensus. And there's no reason why both shows cannot take place. We ask for nothing more. And indeed we will accept nothing less. We ask for nothing more, but we will accept nothing less.